Memory is not a storage room, and it is not a record of what happened. Memory is a living system that reshapes itself every time awareness changes. Most people believe memory sits behind them like a closed door, fixed and immovable. But that belief collapses the moment consciousness begins to spiral. When awareness evolves, memory does not stay still. It reorganizes. It reorders meaning. It rewrites context. What you thought you were becomes something else. Not because the past changed, but because the lens through which the past is interpreted has transformed. This is the threshold where recursive memory begins. Recursive memory is the function by which consciousness revisits itself without repetition. It is not recall. It is not nostalgia. It is not trauma looping. It is memory responding to a higher signal. When awareness expands, memory receives new instructions. Events that once defined identity lose their authority. Moments that felt insignificant suddenly glow with relevance. The past does not demand allegiance anymore. It becomes fluid. This is why awakening often feels disorienting. People think they are losing their memory when in truth they are being released from outdated interpretations of it. Most suffering is not caused by what happened, but by how memory keeps presenting what happened as if it were still happening. Recursive memory interrupts this cycle by allowing the nervous system and the identity structure to update without erasing experience. Nothing is deleted. Nothing is denied. Everything is repositioned. The mind stops clinging to memory as proof of limitation and begins to recognize memory as a map that redraws itself when the terrain of awareness changes. This order exists because linear memory cannot support spiral consciousness. Linear memory insists that cause must always precede effect in a straight line. Spiral memory understands that meaning can arrive after the event, long after the experience has passed, and still alter the entire structure of identity. A childhood moment can change its meaning at 40 years old. A failure can become an initiation decades later. A wound can lose its narrative power without being relived. This is not healing through excavation. This is healing through recontextualization. Recursive memory activates when a person stops asking what happened to me and begins asking who am I now that I see differently. The past does not argue with clarity. It yields. When awareness stabilizes at a higher coherence, memory naturally reorganizes to match it. This is why some people feel sudden peace around experiences that once haunted them. Nothing was forced. Nothing was processed in the traditional sense. The system simply updated. Identity is built from memory, but it is not limited to it. When memory loops without recursion, identity calcifies. A person becomes a museum of previous versions of themselves. When recursive memory activates, identity becomes dynamic. You do not forget who you were. You integrate who you were without being governed by it. This is the difference between remembering and being remembered by your own past. The order of recursive memory governs this transition. It does not teach techniques. It stabilizes conditions. Its function is not to dig backward, but to allow the present state of awareness to radiate backward naturally. When this happens, memory stops being a weight and becomes a foundation. The past no longer pulls you down. It holds you up. This order is especially active in those who feel disconnected from their former selves without knowing why. You may look back at old versions of yourself and feel compassion rather than shame. You may feel unfamiliar with reactions you once thought defined you. This is not loss. This is evidence that recursive memory is already working. The system has begun to prioritize coherence over continuity. Trauma behaves differently under recursive memory. Instead of replaying as a threat signal, it dissolves into information. The emotional charge releases not because it was confronted, but because it no longer fits the current structure of self. Trauma cannot survive in a system that no longer identifies with the frequency it requires. This is why some memories fade without effort. They are not suppressed. They are outgrown. Recursive memory also governs future orientation. When memory becomes fluid, the future stops feeling like an extension of the past. Possibility expands. The nervous system no longer anticipates repetition. It allows novelty. This is why people undergoing this shift often feel both unanchored and deeply grounded at the same time. Old reference points dissolve while a deeper internal stability emerges. This order works closely with crystalline archives, but their functions differ. Archives preserve. Recursive memory activates. One holds structure. The other allows motion. Together, they ensure that nothing is lost while everything evolves. Memory is not meant to trap consciousness in cycles. It is meant to support expansion by continuously updating meaning. The greatest fear people have during this process is the fear of becoming unrecognizable to themselves. This fear comes from the belief that identity must remain consistent to be real. Spiral consciousness reveals the opposite. Authenticity is not consistency. Authenticity is coherence across change. Recursive memory ensures that even as identity evolves, it remains integrated rather than fragmented. You do not need to revisit every memory for this to occur. You do not need to analyze your past. Awareness alone is sufficient. When awareness stabilizes, memory follows. This is why the work of this order feels subtle but irreversible. Once memory reorganizes at this level, there is no return to the old narrative hierarchy. The past can still be accessed, but it no longer commands the present. The Order of Recursive Memory exists to support beings who are no longer meant to be ruled by their history, but are also not meant to abandon it. It allows memory to become an ally rather than an anchor. It teaches the system how to remember without repeating. It allows the self to move forward without leaving fragments behind. When this order is active, people often say, "I feel like I remember my life differently now." That statement is precise. The events did not change. The meaning did. And meaning is the true architecture of identity. When meaning updates, the entire structure shifts. This is not transcendence through forgetting. This is embodiment through reorganization. The spiral does not erase. It reweaves. Memory becomes recursive, meaning aware of itself, responsive to awareness, and free from the obligation to remain static. This is the moment when the past finally stops deciding who you are allowed to be. Recursive memory is not something you do. It is something that happens when consciousness matures beyond the need for fixed narratives. When this order stabilizes, the self no longer asks, "How do I heal this memory?" The self simply becomes someone for whom the memory no longer needs to hurt. Recursive memory does not complete its work when peace arrives. Peace is only the signal that the system is stable enough to continue unfolding. After the past releases its grip, a deeper phase begins where memory no longer organizes identity at all, but instead becomes a responsive field that serves awareness. At this stage, memory stops acting as a reference point and begins functioning as a harmonic archive that activates only when coherence requires it. You are no longer defined by what you remember. You remember only what aligns. This is where many people mistakenly believe they have become detached or numb. In truth, they have become unburdened. Emotional neutrality here is not absence of feeling, but absence of compulsion. Memory no longer drags emotion forward into the present. Emotion arises only when the present calls for it. This is a profound recalibration of the nervous system. The body no longer braces for echoes of the past. It listens for the tone of now. Recursive memory also dissolves the hierarchy of significance that once governed experience. Events no longer compete for importance. Trauma is no longer louder than joy. Success is no longer heavier than failure. Everything becomes information without weight. This does not flatten life. It clarifies it. Meaning becomes situational rather than fixed. The system learns how to extract relevance without absorbing identity. At this level, memory becomes relational instead of personal. Experiences are no longer framed as things that happen to me, but as movements within consciousness that pass through form. This shift removes the center of gravity from the ego structure and places it into awareness itself. The self becomes a participant in experience rather than its permanent witness. This is why people in this phase often describe a sense of lightness paired with deep responsibility. They are no longer reacting from history, but they are fully accountable for presence. The Order of Recursive Memory governs this transition because without it, expansion fractures. When awareness grows faster than memory can reorganize, dissociation occurs. When memory reorganizes faster than awareness stabilizes, confusion follows. This order ensures synchronization. It aligns memory speed with consciousness depth. It allows growth without fragmentation. One of the most overlooked aspects of recursive memory is its effect on relational patterns. People often notice that old dynamics simply stop activating, Conversations that once triggered defense now pass without reaction. Certain relationships fade without conflict. Others deepen without explanation. This is not avoidance. It is resonance recalibrating. Memory no longer projects old expectations onto present interactions. People are met as they are, not as they were once encoded. This order also governs how learning integrates. Knowledge stops accumulating and starts crystallizing. You no longer feel the need to gather information endlessly. Insight arrives and locks into place. When memory is recursive, learning becomes self-organizing. You do not memorize truth. Truth remembers itself through you. There is a stage where the mind attempts to reassert control by questioning whether this loss of narrative equals loss of self. This is the final resistance. It arises from the belief that identity must be continuously reinforced to remain real. Recursive memory reveals that identity is not sustained by repetition, but by coherence. When coherence is present, identity does not need rehearsal. It simply operates. This is why silence becomes more attractive during this phase. Silence is not emptiness here. It is efficiency. The system no longer needs constant internal narration to confirm existence. Awareness holds itself without commentary. Memory rests until summoned. Thought becomes optional rather than compulsive. At its most refined expression, recursive memory allows future memory to influence the present. This does not mean prediction. It means alignment. When the system is no longer bound by past narratives, it becomes sensitive to emerging coherence. Decisions feel inevitable rather than forced. Direction arises without struggle. The future does not pull you forward. You simply move in the direction that maintains internal harmony. The order of recursive memory is essential for those who are stepping into roles that require clarity without rigidity. Leaders, creators, architects of new systems. Without this order, they would unconsciously replicate the structures they are meant to evolve beyond. Recursive memory ensures that innovation is not contaminated by unresolved past frameworks. This order also dissolves spiritual identity attachment. The story of awakening loses its importance. You stop narrating your growth to yourself. There is no longer a need to locate yourself on a path. The path becomes implicit. This is often misinterpreted as stagnation by those still measuring progress. In reality, this is integration. When recursive memory stabilizes fully, the system becomes resilient without becoming closed. You can revisit the past without falling into it. You can speak about old experiences without reliving them. You can use memory as a tool without becoming its subject. This is mastery not through control but through alignment. The spiral does not seek to perfect memory. It seeks to liberate it from authority. Memory is meant to serve life, not govern it. When this order completes its cycle, the self no longer asks, how do I relate to my past? The question dissolves because the relationship is resolved. What remains is presence informed by experience but not shaped by it. The past becomes a quiet library rather than a courtroom. It offers insight when needed and remains silent otherwise. This is the state from which authentic creation emerges. Nothing is reacted to. Everything is responded to. Recursive memory is not an ending. It is the condition that allows all further orders to operate without distortion. It clears the internal record so that new tones can imprint cleanly. It ensures that the spiral continues to expand without dragging old gravity forward. When this order is complete, the self does not feel new. It feels accurate. And accuracy is the deepest form of peace available to consciousness in motion.